I think I think we should probably start now because we have a slightly shorter time today. Some audience members are still coming in. But I think I'm going to open the session. Good afternoon and welcome to the Centre for Food Policy's February Food Thinkers. These are our regular events where we discuss all things related to food systems and food policy. My name is Lindy Sharp and I lead the food research collaboration here at the Centre. You will have noticed, obviously, the different start time for today's session and duration. This is because our speaker today is based in Hanoi, which is 7 hours ahead of us. It's also already very late there. And so special thanks to Nozomi for staying up late to talk to us this afternoon. A couple of things to mention quickly. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be available afterwards online via our YouTube channel. I hope that you'll have lots of questions. Please write these in the Q&A box, not the chat box. We will take questions at the end of the talk and we'll try to get through as many as possible. And when you put them in, they don't always all show up, so don't think you're the only person asking a question. We'll come back to them at the end. I'd like to flag our next Food Thinkers session, which is on the 23rd of March, when the doyen of food policy, Marion Nessel, will be giving us a personal account of working on food systems advocacy. And finally, if you'd like to tweet, and please do, use the hashtag #FoodThinkers, all one word, and then the handle @FoodPolicyCity for the Centre for Food Policy. Moving on now to the more important part of the session. It's a huge pleasure to introduce our speaker, Nozomi Kawarazuka. Nozomi is a social scientist at the International Potato Center, fantastic name for an institution, which is part of the International Research Organization, CGIAR, which is based in Hanoi. Nozomi began her academic career with a degree in international nutrition and then worked for an NGO in the Lake Victoria region of Kenya, where she saw that fishing communities were involved in a vicious circle of poverty, HIV, AIDS, and food insecurity, in which gender inequality played a hidden but central role. And then she subsequently took a master's degree in development studies and a PhD from the University of East Anglia in Norwich, returning to Kenya for her PhD ethnographic fieldwork. Nozomi since shifted her geographical focus to Southeast Asia, but retained her interest in gender. Her current research looks at the mechanisms of marginalization and exclusion in informal food systems and at male bias in agricultural technologies. And drawing on this research and pinning it back to policy studies more generally and happenings in the UK, this evening, she's going to help us to rethink food policy from feminist perspectives. So Nozomi, over to you.
Thank you, Lindy, for introduction. Hi, everyone. Today, I'm going to explain about feminist perspectives in the food system research and policy. There is a growing interest in gender equality and social inclusion, especially after the COVID-19, because since then, we all recognized that the fragility of food system and unequal distribution of impact we realized. So first, I would like to suggest that the food system is contributing to gender inequality. I'm going to explain how and why by using your beautiful diagram from Center for Food Policy. So politics plays in the food system, male-oriented and male-privileged food system lacks women's perspectives and support unequal distribution of food and nutrition. Women are hit harder by diseases as shown by the case of COVID. Women are also hit harder by climate change and associated water and land insecurity. In the society, women play significant roles in care and food preparation, but those are not included in food policy and food system agenda. Lastly, the food system is an economic system. Women are often concentrated in low-paid informal food economy, and there is an exploitation of women's labor in global food production and also processing industry. So this problem of gender is not new at all. So gender has been frequently mentioned in the food system, but put aside as a separate issue rather than incorporated into the food system agenda. Everybody says gender is important, but that's all. So why it is not fully incorporated into the food system concept and frameworks? Feminist scholars point out that the current neoliberal capitalist system and its ideology allows us detach gender from the concept, from all aspects, including food systems. So there is a social science discipline called feminist political economy, which looks at the mechanism in which gender inequality is produced and reproduced through everyday practice, politics, policies, and research. I briefly explain about it. Please look at the figure on the right. So I describe the capitalist system by flowers. So capitalist system look at relationships between labor, market, and capital. Actually, economic activities depend on non-economic elements, such as natural resources, women's labor for child care, and food preparation. But they remain invisible underground, so unrecognized, and as if they are forever free resources available every time for free. So therefore, those non-economic aspects are neglected from account of how capitalist system works, both conceptually and practically, methodologically. This ideology allows the capitalist economy to create multiple hierarchy, even in research disciplines, as a society and within the household. So research, policy, and practice separate and devalue elements that are not directly related to market systems, despite we depend on them. So this is a contradiction of capitalism. Even some people call it as a crisis of capitalism. So I now explain how this crisis of capitalism played out during the pandemic. The pandemic itself is part of a crisis of capitalism. Because capitalism exploits natural resources, we become too close to animals, wild animals. And we have been reproducing inequalities all the time. So fragility of social provisioning that we have been discussing now during the COVID, it comes from the contradiction of capitalism. So understanding of crisis within the capitalist economy and its thinking is too narrow. We need to explore overall crisis tendencies inherent in structural features that I discussed, that underground issues. So when you look at the crisis tendency of climate change, we observe that COVID and climate change are overlapping in terms of causes and consequences, because the root cause of problem is the same, the separation of non-economic activity from the market. So in the past, global responses to financial crisis rather reinforced gender gaps because of male-privileged crisis management policies and practices that neglected women's experiences and their underlying problems. So big question to the audience today here is how can we incorporate gender into the post-pandemic food system policies, food system agenda. So I explained about separation, subordination, and devaluing of non-economic activities. What I would like to show in today's presentation is interdependency, interplay, and revaluing of non-economic activities. I will do so through the recent study on women in agribusiness enterprises in Vietnam and Myanmar We conducted this research last year on the middle of a crisis. So our research, we conducted field work in 2 sites in each country. A Lamdong province in central highland of Vietnam is the largest horticultural industry in Vietnam. We interviewed women entrepreneurs such as seed importers, vegetable exporters, agriculture tourism operators, all women. The impact of COVID on their business was mainly supply chain disruption and decreased demand. Lao Cai province is located in Chinese borders, and we looked at cross-border traders, women traders, and local retailers, small-scale informal retailers, mainly livestock. The impact of COVID was derived from a closure of the borders up to now. Still for 2 years, they closed borders, and subsequent economic recession. So in Myanmar, the focus was fisheries in coastal site. In addition to COVID, they had the military coup last year, and it's affected very seriously their livelihood, as well as our research method. So this is a qualitative research. We conducted in-depth interviews with 30 women. Due to COVID restriction, the half of the interview was hybrid in Vietnam, that one local researcher visited them face-to-face, while I was connected online from Hanoi. For Myanmar, we did all interview online. We discussed many times because that affects a lot for quality of information. But we did a lot of literature reviews and how improve, how to do the best online. And we asked the local researchers who knows very well about the context they conducted research. So now I'm going to share my findings. There are 3 key findings, very short, and each findings has key messages and implications. So please pay attention for those things. So first key finding is that the informal agri-food system has its own safety nets based on reciprocal support. I explain it from the relationship between women fish dealers and male fishers. So fish catches are always uncertain. Fishers cannot go to fishing without money first. So, they therefore borrow money from women fish dealers, and women fish dealers borrow from food sellers. And then fishers return money by fish. So women fish dealers also receive financial and also material support from their family or in-laws to invest in productive assets to lend to fishers. Male fishers are often the friend of their husband or friend of their male relatives. Therefore, they have trust relations. During the COVID, fishermen keep borrowing money from their fish dealers to survive. Or even they ask to provide rice instead of money to fulfill immediate needs of household food security. So one fish dealer, Dao Tintin, she said that I still provide credit to fishers as I consider them part of my family. So this shows that their business is deeply embedded in family relations. I observed the same system in coastal Kenyan fisheries, that women fish dealers lent money to fishers for food security. And the same literature I found from the Ghana fisheries. So it's a very unique system. So women's agribusiness stands between economic activity and non-economic activities. So I put there fish, livestock, vegetable enterprise between. So therefore, research on understanding women's agribusiness need to look at both sides. So key message is that women need to invest in reciprocal support relationships for maintaining their agri-food business, which are often neglected in economic analysis. So non-economic activities, relationships sustaining relationship with family are equally valuable for women to increase their own business chances. So methodological and conceptual implication is that research on food system need pluralistic approaches because informal food systems are diverse and complex, always embedded in the society's gender and family relations. Okay, so the next finding is that women's economic activities are essentially embedded in their identity as a mother, wife, or daughter-in-law. So husbands' disagreement of continuing their business or women's feeling of guilt as a mother, that has been frequently mentioned and was very emotional discussions during the interview. So for example, Ban, she's a cross-border fish trading company organizing fruits and fish. Imagine this food system between China and Vietnam that was managed, handled by this woman. And she has two young kids. And husband said that you should stop this business because you cannot take care of two kids. So she said that when my husband suggested that I quit my job, I thought about it over and over, but I decided to continue. I feel sorry for my children. I'm wondering if my children are disadvantaged because I'm busy all the time and I cannot be with them. So another lady, Chan, she's an organic vegetable production and trader, and she hires many workers like the photo here. And she said that I divorced my husband because he disagreed with taking out a loan to expand my business, saying that running a small business was enough for a woman. So she left her husband, now living with her mother, who look after her daughter. So this is a reality that how women handle food system while they are at the same time a mother. So when women are involved in the agricultural market systems, they cannot separate themselves, their other identities. They stand between, so I put woman there between. The feminist literature suggests that male entrepreneurs can separate their business from the family. They don't even mention about family. The research framework initially focusing on economic activity was originally designed to understand men's experience, but not women's. So key message here is that the food system is embedded in the patriarchy. Women play central roles in both non-economic and economic activities of the food system. So women's empowerment should not be simply involving more women in market-oriented agri-food systems. I think we all know about it, but I very often see the message that women increased incomes and they are empowered. This message looks like as if we don't care about women's other roles, only we care about economic roles, which is wrong. So implication is how can we conceptualize the dependency of the food system on women? The food system research in social science is more comfortable to talk about inequality by class or ethnicity, caste, but not gender. Why? Because it exists within the same class, within the same caste, within the same ethnicity, even within the same household. How can we conceptualize? Are you comfortable to talk this politics? This is a great challenge so far. So the last finding is that COVID-19 affects not only economic activities, but also non-economic activities. The latter has a significant implication for women's agribusiness and the agri-food system. So I introduce a story of Omar, who lost her husband in acute diabetes. Suddenly, her husband was her business partner, providing not only physical labor to carry fish, clean fish, sort out fish, but also business connections with other fishers. So she said that I feel that my husband passed away because of a shortage of doctors and medical services due to the political crisis. When I resumed my work after my husband's passing, I was exhausted as I had to weigh fish until 11 p.m. because husband used to help her, but now she do alone. And I couldn't sleep at all. I felt depressed and I didn't want to continue working. I even thought of giving up this livelihood, but I couldn't do so in reality as I'm responsible for providing for my 2 daughters. And she had to send her school-aged daughters while their school was stopped, but she cannot look after them. So she had to send her daughters to her relatives, adult niece, who can look after. Otherwise, she cannot focus on her business alone. So process in which women's agribusiness are affected by COVID is very complicated because their non-economic activities are also affected by COVID. In the global north, child care was highlighted, but in the global south, it is far more than the issue of child care because entire economic activities of women are related to non-economic activities as well. So key message here is that without addressing social provisioning for the poor, especially for women, agricultural development alone cannot make agriculture resilient to ongoing overlapping crisis of COVID, crisis of capitalism, and gender inequality, climate change. So I would suggest that we need transdisciplinary approaches to research and development to put more emphasis and value on understanding non-economic, socially valuable activities. Those are embodied in the food market systems. So this is nearly the last slide of mine. So I want to say that applying a feminist approach to the food policy and food system research could help and improve our understandings of food systems. So feminist political economy approaches allow us to look at root causes of poverty and inequality, which are hidden underground as shown, which is social and political. Visible part described by flowers are the outcomes of the social political problems that are not root cause but outcomes. So how can we change dominant discourses and increase value of research on non-economic activities, which are currently subordinated by research on economic activities? How can we incorporate those women's experiences I described now into the post-COVID development planning and policy for food systems? Those are my suggestions and the challenges that I want to discuss with the audience today. So the short acknowledgement that the study I explained the Vietnam and Myanmar was funded by CGIAR Gender Platform led by SHIP and in collaboration with ILI, World Fish and local partners. We thank all respondents, especially from Myanmar, during the difficult time. Lindy, this is the last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nozomi. That was amazing. Absolutely amazing. It's immediately made me think that research that my organization does with food hubs and local food in this country, in the UK, should be immediately looking at how gender would impact all the different facets of their activities. Thank you very much. It was absolutely fascinating. Let's go quickly to the audience. And here I see a question from Stephanie, who says, emotions and personal relationships seem to be a theme here, but seem to be neglected in food systems research. Why do you think that is? And is it because they're considered female domains?
Yes, because of female domains, because the original analysis framework, analytical frameworks, conceptual framework of food systems are tailored for understanding from men's perspective and men's experience. So there is no space to enter those aspects into existing, traditional, let's say very traditional food system analysis framework, because that was come from original one. It's come from male perspectives. And when originally maybe centuries ago or 50 years ago, when they started to research on food systems, that they were not considering the women's aspect, and we are still using those old frameworks. That also affect our interest. Also, when I talk about personality or emotions of women, then which journals can accept my research? Only some feminist journal articles or some gender research journal articles. If I go the mainstream food system research, they say this is not our topic, reject it. So this is also discussed in feminist scholars. That is another challenge, that research itself is marginalized. Thank you.
And a follow-up, a question. Can you give any examples of food systems analysis frameworks that incorporate non-economic activities, the below-ground things that you were? I loved your image of capitalism as a bunch of flowers. I thought that was a lovely image. Can you give some examples of frameworks that incorporate non-economic activities? Have you found any? Or?
I think now just those what I call feminist political economy perspectives, which is very diverse. Even among the feminist political economy scholars, they have a little bit slightly different ideas and school of thought. But they are now starting to incorporate. Just recently, especially COVID enabled us to rethink, and very well received. Also, some of geographers, natural science, those geographers who do ecology research are on the same metaphor they are using, that natural resources are also neglected. And, as if the free resources forever. In that way, the climate change, agenda of climate change is dropped always from the mainstream capitalism research, including food systems research. So we face the same issues. So those geographers are calling a collaboration with feminist scholars that, we are in the same, so we have to have those combinations. And it's very hard to do everything alone. I'm also looking at those food system aspects of Myanmar and Vietnam research I didn't explain today, but it's very broad. And how you do, you need a big team to understand a different element. Even today I didn't talk, but natural resources is a critical part of the fisheries in Myanmar. So you cannot just neglect that issue from food system. I didn't highlight today because I wanted to focus on gender, but it's same. So in that same way, now it's time. It's very new, and we really need supporters from many different disciplines to accommodate those different aspects into a current mainstream research framework. It would be a great challenge so we are challenging status quo, not adding gender, put on gender a little bit to mention, but we want to do the full research that still don't have the framework. I think the reason is a bit too complicated if we include everything. So that I also want to get some advice from those senior people who have been working on this area and have broad perspective, because those who do this research need a lot of different, open-minded, a broad perspective. Otherwise, it's not possible to collaborate. Okay.
There was a huge report on biodiversity in this country a couple of years ago. You may have seen that, in which the Das Gupta report, which made the same point, that because natural resources that we all depend on for everything that are invisible, or they're kind of taken for granted. They're below ground in your diagram, so they're therefore discounted and devalued. They're devalued. They don't have a value. Emmy Simmons is saying the big question is, how do patriarchal and capitalist systems acknowledge that gender plays a role in the way that food systems work or fail? She says the kind of findings that you've identified have been raised for decades, as you acknowledge yourself, Nozomi, but action and policy are not changing at an appropriate pace or scale. I guess that's the challenge. And Shriram is making the comment that this is a very interesting presentation, but by highlighting some of the peculiarities in developing countries, such as the dynamics of the informal sector, intertwining of economic and non-economic activities and social protection in the form of informal support, this presentation challenges many of the accepted theories and principles of economic and social change. Does it call for a re-evaluation of these theories and their epistemologies? Small question for you. Have we been wrongfully applying theories that have emerged from industrial society experiences to explain and understand other societies? So that's interesting. Is our kind of whole epistemological approach wrong?
I think I'm very happy to receive this comment, and thank you so much. I think I think we want to challenge the traditional theories. We might be we are not epistemologically even. We want to challenge, and we have to realize, for example, if you look at feminist enterprise research, there is a big business management literatures. They have been already doing a lot, reframing theories and concept, analytical framework, because those are all long time that only look at business management, economic aspect, that what women lack compared to men. But now they incorporated non-economic aspect in women's business management. So we could try, but food system is a much broader topic. So we need a lot of energy and knowledge and expertise to do so. Epistemological challenge, absolutely yes. And that was my key message. I really want critical questions for each of you, those who do food system research, and also policies, because policy is always influencing to economic systems, but not influencing non-economic system. It's very, very hard. It's the same system. In the same way, in policy, we are neglecting those parts.
I'm momentarily distracted because people are putting questions into the chat. Can you please put your questions into the Q&A, then we can harvest them neatly. One of my colleagues, Mark Spires, says, our funders who are currently prioritizing gender in food systems research, so funders who are prioritizing gender, are they going about this in the right way? Do you think they have the right ideas, the funders of research? I guess that's very variable.
I think this is a very good question. Yes, funders are also very much interested, but more interested in development than research, than this kind of theoretical part. And also it can very easily go different in wrong direction. As I said, women's economic empowerment, income increase, and marketizing women, all those things can be embraced by those funding. So those, how can we incorporate critical aspect into those funding is a great challenge, because development funders have very different perspectives, and they really want to see immediate outcomes. So even they can easily say that Nozomi, we will give this budget for sweet potato development. So for gender is a priorities, but you need, at the end, you need to income increase, women's income increase. That is a key target for them. I have to argue a lot about it. So this funding just giving to gender is still good to pay attention to gender, but we need concept frameworks, research, that those things are not funded so far.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very, yeah, interesting. So another comment has come in which says, this is from Giulia Nicolini. So she says, I agree that it's limited to look at women's empowerment only in terms of their income. But when it comes to measuring the impact of food research or policy, what are your thoughts on how we can include women's unpaid labor in that and this? How can we make women's hidden labor within food systems more visible within existing frameworks?
I think good questions. I think impact, we don't have to, or we should not look at individual women. We have to impact policies or rule of changing rules or systems. That is our goals, not individual women to be empowered. So that would be the long term. But if you do something research, and if you can influence research policies or structural, politics, influence politics, that is what we could aim for. Because if we look at the individuals, then we forget again about structural issues. Ending up that what feminist says, that you are fixing women into market systems rather than fixing system to accommodate women. So that we don't want. So that is a kind of dilemma we have.
I was struck in another paper that you wrote on innovation that I read, which is really interesting, on how so you're talking about how women's innovation, or women's attitude to innovation and perception of innovation was different from men's and official perceptions of innovation, because it was quite incremental and quite practically focused, but also it was curtailed by their own sense of what was appropriate for their culture. Can you talk a bit about that? For example, there wasn't much sort of cross between the two cultural groups you're looking at. The women in one group would not adopt or imitate practices from another group because they felt it was inappropriate. Can you talk a bit about that sort of cultural constraint?
Yes, so that innovation, I was looking at how women perceive about agricultural innovation. Because usually, as I'm working for CGIAR, is an organization that scientists develop technologies and want to give to women. But there is a huge gap what women want. And we, biophysical scientists, develop technologies. So there is a huge mismatch that they cannot adapt. So I did research on what is a perception of women about innovations. So for example, let's say the new variety of coffee planting or new animals. Can you suddenly give to women and can they grow? It's not possible. If you observe their everyday life, even changing a small thing, women need to get approval from husband, in-laws. And if you fail something business, they would be blamed and they would affect all family relations. So women are very cautious about what they want to try, what risks they want to take. And also the women always follow their peer. So there are some women role models within the small community. So if somebody do some small changes, they can follow, but not necessarily bringing new varieties, new breed of animals, and then giving women. That doesn't work. That I was saying. And also ethnicity matters a lot because each ethnic group have different marriage practice, different values. and different family patriarchal relationships and migration systems. So those things, you cannot bring fixed technologies, fixed policies into that this is a gender policy that you should apply to everywhere. That doesn't work. That is another challenge we face. There is no one manual to apply. So I think everything is same. So we have to look at how women, the process in which women perceive innovation, process in which women develop innovation by themselves. And that research, I also did the same for men. What men perceive innovation? That men are perceiving innovation in the same way as scientists perceive, because they don't have any constraint for families, right? And they are the full decision maker, so they can directly go for the technologies immediately. But women have to be very careful and cautious about how that affects their relationship with husband, relationship with mother-in-law. So that is, I think, all we have to consider all the time.
Interesting. There's another question here from Lou, who says, gender issues are intrinsic to our institutions, such as the UN, SGIAR, NGOs, universities, researchers. Do you think we can implement feminist R&D approaches from institutions that are actually not really sensitized? What can we do at the institutional level to make sure that feminist research is not marginalized?
That is a super sensitive questions. And I have been discussing with my colleague who support feminists, because even I was not brave enough to talk about feminist approaches in CGIAR, because a principle of CGIAR and other big organizations are introducing technologies. In that way, they want to change the world, while we are criticizing it. So there is a bit sensitive and political to talk, but I think that overall goals that we want to achieve, it's the same. So there is some ways to we collaborate, and we do. So I'm still doing this presentation. I did the same presentation within CG. So there is some space that donors could consider, but still, as you said, it's premature, and donors really need immediate outcomes. And CGIAR want to change the world by technologies. So how can we do both? I'm not criticizing technologies, and we cannot stop capitalism now, but we have to live with that. But to eventually change systems, that is we need more influential people to support this approach, especially from academic people. Thank you.
You don't think it's not just as simple as having more female decision makers?
I think not that simple, but that is the first step. I think one of the things is, gender always, CGIAR, for example, we do gender in research and gender in workplace, and both have to come together, because the high-level decision makers, they also need women's perspectives. And I'm not saying that men don't have women's perspective, but sometimes it's difficult. If you are always higher position and never experienced in the minority positions, it's very difficult for them. It takes time to understand, or never understand. So that bringing more women in decision-making positions, in the donor position, in CG's agriculture sector is extremely male-dominant. But position for women is absolutely important. Even when I collaborate other research discipline people, and it's much easier if we have the diverse social groups. If only white senior men and I do research, that is idea can be very fixed and difficult. So those both working environment is also very important.
I just wondered, so we've got some more questions I'll come to, but just wanted to sneak one in. Do you have as it were, kind of take your findings back to the groups where you've done the research, to the men and the women, and say, well, look, this is what we found, and there could be benefits in, or just presenting the findings. What sort of, well, have you done that? And if you have, what kind of response do you get from the men and the women in the groups that you've talked to? Is there a kind of defensiveness against what you're finding, or a receptivity? Or
so Lindy, that are you asking that I do feedback to to respondents? Okay.
Yeah.
I did sometimes, especially when I take more participatory approach for research, like that's the research I did for innovation. I do, but before doing that, I also need to talk about gender in that community, right? Because otherwise, women are marginalized in the communities. So we also have to do. And I had one experience that working with Care International, who are very community-oriented people, talk with women, and some of the women I talked, they can really share their experience of patriarchy once they understand gender themselves. But before, they have never heard about gender, and my research is gender. So it's sometimes it's difficult. So first we talk with them, and one woman, ethnic minority woman, she has Facebook, and her Facebook name, she changed after we talk with them. She changed her name to literally, my heart is as strong as a stone in her language. My heart is strong like a stone. Oh, really? So, so she got, that is a real empowerment. She was empowered, and she put that my heart is strong like stone. And then we even invited to Hanoi for the gender workshop. And then her husband also accompanied, and then she also shared community. So it's possible, it's community level to feedback, and to that is also very important to involve. But we have to be very careful because they are also they don't have enough knowledge to judge, to raise voice. It becomes very dangerous one-way communication. So if you have that, you can invest in that way, like we work with Care International for a long time. And at the end, we can have a lot of communication personally. Then it works. But I still believe, women, it's not women themselves of the super marginalized who should raise directly voice to a policymaker, that we have to interpret, we have to digest as researchers, as professional as researchers, to digest that process is very important. And in that process, we include those interaction directly with farmers. Yeah.
Let me put this comment to you from Karen, who says, I wonder if anyone researching this topic has looked at who holds global wealth. Women will hold the majority of global wealth in about 30 years, I believe, this commentator says. How will or could this power balance shift contribute to the kinds of food system changes we're discussing? Karen, I'd be interested if you put your source in for that very interesting statistic that you've included. So that one's about would a shift in wealth, do you think it would drive or enable shifts in food systems?
I think that is a high level agenda that we aim for, because that has been the problem. I'm not very sure if we can reach within 30 years, actually. Still may take more time, especially after COVID, but that we should aim for, and that can be a transformation, actually. So that we should not try to empower individual women individually. That is not, we have to change systems and change policies that we should aim for.
So this is something I've been thinking about as well. Andrea says, do you think these gender inequalities persist in women in the global north? who are choosing, for example, not to be mothers and thus may have less of a burden of unpaid work. But I also thought when you were talking about, you wouldn't have been aware of this, but the president of the National Farmers Union in this country is a woman who's called Minette Batters. And she made a very, very strong speech yesterday critical of government policy in relation to farming. And so there was a very, very empowered woman. She is actually a livestock farmer, excoriating the government for what it's doing to farming. I thought that was an interesting example. But Andrea's specific point is, do you think that these gender inequalities that you're talking about persist in women in the global north?
I think who are choosing not to be mothers, and that's I think that because of gender inequality, right? And also they are choosing because they want to continue career path. And for women, if you want to compete in this capitalist system as employers or employees, then you don't have time to look after family. So they may choose one. You have to sacrifice. So those things are also contributing, and also, but that is the outcome of the government policies that doesn't support or doesn't take actions. So it's interlinked, I think. I'm from Japan, and this is a real problem in my country as well. It's a huge gender issues that women have to choose not having children for many reasons. Yeah.
But I think also, I mean, the example that Andrea cited was not having children, but I think in farming in this country, and also I think a lot of research has been done in America, that the invisible labor is a huge
yes,
hidden factor. I mean, you know, the amount of work that's done on farms by family members. It's true also actually in retail that a lot of work is done in certain kinds of food retail in the convenience sector that is not, it's not visible, it's not officially economic labor, but actually it is economic. There was a book many years ago, I remember, called If Women Only Counted, by I can't remember the author, Elaine Morgan? No, that's not right. If Women Counted, about on this very subject, about if women's work were quantified in the economy, what would the economy look like? Perhaps it's time for us to bring those ideas back. Karen's produced this, here, a source for her information. Credit Suisse calculates that 40% of global wealth is held by women. And UBS calculates that this will have a compound annual growth rate of 5.7 by 2024. So 40% of global wealth held by women. I mean, I don't know what to make of that, really. It's very interesting. This global woman doesn't know much of. Sorry, Nozomi, have you lost us?
No. Yes, I want to add that the women unpaid labor, Lindy, about the Stephanie's question as well. So unpaid labor is not simply child care. That, as you said, agriculture is mostly unpaid labor. So, for example, I shared that presentation of Myanmar's fish dealers, women. They mobilize all family members from daughters, sons, and father-in-law. Everybody have to do. It's all consists of unpaid labor. So even food systems, agri-food systems, if you consider production part, it's mostly we are heavily depending on unpaid labor of those farmers. I think that's another reason that farmers are not really attractive work for many young people.
Yeah. Karen's just finishing up by saying that she agrees that changes won't happen one woman at a time, but when women control global wealth, institutional shift might come as a result.
Yes.
We're just running out of time. If I could just squeeze the last point that from Stephanie, which is kind of version of what I was saying, is do you see areas where the empowerment of women would come at the expense of disempowerment of men, and do you experience pushback on your research for that reason?
So that men's disempowerment is also another serious issue. That's true. That's really true. So we have to have a very sensitive approaches that women's empowerment overall also support men. That key message is often missing. So for example, another example like disabled people, so welfare systems of disabled people, sometimes it also support all the rest of the communities. So even if women are empowered, husband and men also can benefit from that. That message is often missing. And as if we are ignoring men, so that we need a sensitive approach. And I still believe that is possible to support when we support women, and men also can benefit, and we can challenge toxic masculinities in that way.
So we need a kind of global comms campaign on that, I think. We've come to the end of our time, Nozomi. The book that I was mentioning is by Marilyn Waring. Elaine Selfrey put it in the chat. Thank you so much. This was really interesting. I think we should really workshop this idea, to have people in the room with a piece of paper to say, how would this apply to your research? How would you bring this in? So you're not off the hook, Nozomi. We may be summoning you back for some workshops. I'd like to thank you on behalf of all of us for this evening's talk, and I'd also like to thank Elaine Hudson, Lucy Bennett, and the team at City Events for making this all possible. I remind you that our next session is on the 23rd of March, when it will be Marion Nessa. And I'd like to thank Nozomi again for staying up very late to talk to us this evening. So thank you all. Thank you for your questions, and thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you everyone for your time today to join. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.